Good morning. In today's video, I'll discuss the thaw in India-China ties which have been spurred by India's assessment of Trump 2.0, the second innings of President Trump. Now recently, which is on the 26th of March, at the Asia Society in New Delhi, India's External Affairs Minister Jay Shankar, he gave his assessment of Trump 2.0. He said that the present Trump administration, it has ended the rule-based order that the Americans created 80 years ago, and it worked well for the world. And by doing so, he said that America has changed the terms of engagement with the world. This he called a foundational shift in global geopolitics, which is already undergoing a churn. Now, he is not the only one to use this term foundational shift. Recently, I heard two retired foreign secretaries of India at another interaction. They spoke of what the Trump administration has done in the last 2 months as tectonic shifts. So, phrases like tectonic shift, foundational shift, in my opinion, they are misplaced. Because what the Trump administration is doing is, it is simply reacting to a foundational shift or the action that happened 13 years ago in 2013. That foundational shift has created a multipolar world today where there are two other great powers, China and Russia. And Trump wants to make America great again, make it once again the leading power. That is what he is trying to do. And when you react, you do not have a strategy. What is the end game? What are the objectives that you want to achieve? They are always unclear. They are only clear when you act. When you act, you are very clear about the end game, you are clear about the objectives. And that is what is called a foundational shift, the acting part, with clarity on the objectives. As I said, the tectonic shift happened in 2013. Now, before I go to 2013, there is a bit of a background that needs to be given out. It was in 2009 that the Obama administration offered the G2 or the Group of Two partnership to China. The whole idea of the Americans was that Chinese should be their partner in running the rule-based order that they created. Now, there were two problems with this. The first was that Americans, they have no idea nor the stomach for partnership with any country at a global level. And the more relevant point was that the Chinese, they have their own civilizational wisdom. They could not have agreed to running a world about a global order which was created by the Americans. So the Chinese just kept quiet. They didn't respond. Thereafter, in 2011, President Obama ordered pivot to Asia. The whole idea was that the contestation or the contest will happen in Asia Pacific, and therefore 60% of American military assets should be positioned in this region, Asia Pacific. Then in 2012, Xi Jinping, as the vice president, he visited America, where he met up with his counterpart also, Vice President Joe Biden. During this visit, Xi Jinping proposed to America his idea of a new type of major power relationship, which was not accepted by the Americans. Now, this is the background. With this background, things happened in 2013, as I said, the year of a foundational shift. We know that Xi Jinping became the president in November 2012. So his first overseas visit, within 3 months of assuming his office, it was to Russia. In March 2013, at the invitation of President Putin, Xi Jinping went to Russia. This was a state visit. He met up with President Putin. They had long interaction, and importantly, he interacted at the Moscow Institute of International Relations with the experts and the scholars there. the Russians. And he proposed his vision there to them, and he got a very encouraging feedback, which obviously President Putin would also have agreed to earlier. So his vision was that China and Russia, they should be looking at a community of shared future. Create a community, as many nations who wanted to join it, a community of shared future for prosperity and development, where there will be indivisible security, it will not be a zero-sum game, where the entire community will work under the United Nations, and where all the partners, big or small, will be treated as equals with respect. And this was acceptable even to the Russians. Having got this positive feedback, next what he did was, Xi Jinping, in June of 2013, he went to Washington on an official visit and met his counterpart, President Obama. Now, what came out of his meeting there was a clarity that as far as the Americans were concerned, as I said, the Americans did not approve of the Chinese idea of new type of major power relationship, and their big concern was cybersecurity. The concern was that the Chinese were stealing their technology and something had to be done about it. So it was very clear to Xi Jinping as to Putin was the person, and he had recognized in 2013, which is why he went there in the first place, that Russia under President Putin by 2013 had become a great power. So with total clarity about America, about Russia and the vision and the support that the vision would get from Russia, in September of 2013, in Astana, at Astana in Kazakhstan, he spoke for the first time of what is called the One Belt, One Road. Now more belt and roads were added, and this became the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and it had a grand sweep. The Belt and Road was about taking this or asking the countries, all the countries which were developing countries, less developed countries, asking them to join the Belt and Road, the community of shared future, countries from Latin America, countries from African continent and Asia, in Asia, West Asia, East Asia, South Asia and Central Asia. This was the sweep that the Russians and the Chinese were looking at. And they got very encouraging response, because this was an entirely new vision that nowhere in the history of mankind was ever given, that here were two great powers which wanted to support development and prosperity for the world. Now the whole idea was that dominance should not be there, which has always been there between two powers. If there is, let's say, in this case, America, the reigning power, and the rising power was China. So it would always be in history about dominance, use of military power. Now what they were talking about is difference. An entirely different concept, because all the countries being treated equal with respect and getting the benefits from China and from Russia, they would have difference towards these two great powers, meaning that they will be sensitive to the foreign policy and the core concerns of these countries. So this was the sweep. It was basically a sweep where the global south, now global south, we know there are 193 countries in the world, 80% of this is global south. They started gravitating towards this. Now this sweep and all that was going on was not understood by the Americans and the Western countries. They were simply too arrogant to understand that, and they were quite happy with the military competition or the dominance in Asia Pacific region, because their thinking was that military power is important, and they had a point that something like $3 trillion of Chinese commercial trade would pass through the West Pacific and the Indian Ocean region, and this was Chinese vulnerability. So So that is where they wanted to do the security competition. So while pivot was started by Obama, it was in the first Trump administration that President Trump, continuing with what Obama had done, he renamed US PACOM Pacific Command as US Indo-Pacific Command, giving centrality to India, giving India a role in the security competition of America against China in the Indo-Pacific region. Given this, Modi government, when it came to power in 2014, first of all, the Look East policy of Manmohan Singh government was converted into Act East policy, and once this role was assigned to them or offered to them, they looked beyond and they aligned their vision, their strategic thinking as well as their military capabilities to be there in the entire Indo-Pacific region, that it should become part of the military network of the US Indo-Pacific Command. So India was very happy to play the role of a military bulwark, specifically in the Indian Ocean region and South Asia, as part of the security competition of America, which was intensified, as we know, during the Biden administration. So India was getting a lot. It had the back of the Americans, and with that back of the Americans, India could project to its own people that it was also a rising power, which it was. The problem was that the relative rising power of Russia, of China and India, it was a huge gap of the national power, a gap which was unbridgeable. But it was being projected that India is now in a regional competition with China, a regional competition in South Asia and a regional competition in Indian Ocean region. Now, things changed, as I said, by the reaction or the coming of the Trump 2.0. They changed the terms of engagement. And how they have changed the terms of engagement is, American Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was recently in West Pacific, and he spelled out that his focus as the Defense Secretary was on the first island chain, which is the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea. And there America or the Pentagon wants to re-establish deterrence. That means engage with their allies and strengthen the partnership with the allies. Which is why, if we see the US aid, which has been suspended to all the countries, denied all the countries, has not been denied to Philippines and Taiwan. In fact, the Americans have told Taiwan now that you increase your defense budget to something like 10% of your GDP, which is what they are working on. And Pete Hegseth made it very clear that as we focus on the first island chain and we re-establish deterrence, America does not want conflict with China. He repeated this a few times. What this means is that the security competition that was going on or that was intensified during the Biden administration will take a backseat. It is not the focus of the Trump administration any longer, because the security competition can lead to confrontation, it can lead to conflict. And he said that America does not want conflict with China. Now this sent alarm bells to New Delhi, because this whole thinking of New Delhi was based on being the military bulwark in a security competition that America was having with China. So Delhi had to change its own thinking and strategy. It had to change, because from being a key requirement of the Americans, a strategic requirement as their military bulwark, suddenly India was in a situation where it was not the military bulwark, or we do not know what will happen in the future, but it needed the Americans still to continue projecting that it was in competition with China in South Asia as well as Indian Ocean region. And behind this, the thought is that Jay Shankar has articulated many times that a multipolar Asia is necessary for a multipolar world, and that in Asia, the future of Asia will be influenced by the two big powers, India and China. I'll just come to that in a while. So this security competition had to continue, but there was a worry that the back of the Americans may not be available now. So what to do? So as I said, as part of the change strategy, two steps have been taken. One is taken vis-a-vis Trump 2.0. Now, at the Asia Society, Jaishankar spelled out that after Prime Minister Modi, he visited America on the 13th of February, the joint statement was issued, joint statement of America and India. And he said in that, Modi government wants, we want more security and defense partnership with America. We want better quality of defense partnership with America. Now, when we say better quality of defense partnership, that means India is open to more arms sales from America. In fact, news reports say that Pete Hegseth will be visiting India sometimes in the third week of April to work with India and sign the 10 years defense framework between the two countries. Now, on arms, when he was asked about arms coming from America, because traditionally our arms come from Russia, he said that it is the Americans who stopped giving us arms in 1965, which is when India had to look elsewhere. India looked at the Soviet Union, India looked at Russia, India then also looked at France, it looked at Israel, it looked at Germany. So what he was conveying in very clear terms is that in 2006, once again, there was a gap between 1965 to 2006. In 2006, the Americans again are happy to sell arms to India, and India will be happy to take the arms. In other words, he did not say that, but obviously it will impact upon our relations, defense and military relations with Russia. Then he also said, Jaishankar, that we are looking at energy source, a stable energy source from the Americans. We are happy with that. We are looking at tech world from the Americans. The big companies are already here. And we are looking at bilateral trade with America. Now, the whole idea here is that in the joint statement, it is very clearly written Mission 500. Today, the bilateral trade between India and America stands at $200 billion. This has to be enhanced to $500 billion in 5 years by 2030. In the same period, Jaishankar spelled out at another place that the bilateral trade with Russia by 2030 should be $100 billion. Now, when you are looking at $500 billion with America and $100 billion with Russia, the cutoff date is 2030. Obviously, you're looking at a lot of energy supplies, you're looking at a lot of arms, and which is what President Donald Trump had publicly also said, that India should buy arms worth billions of dollars. So this will impact. But the whole idea is that the Americans, the Trump 2.0, should not be unhappy with India, because just in case they change their mind and they have a security competition, then India should still have the role that it had. Now, as far as China is concerned, because India wants to continue with this security competition. Now, as I said, when you have a competition, there is a problem, it can become a conflict. So the terms of engagement with China also had to be changed. This was a requirement. So, as we know, in October 24, the disengagement was completed, and at the 16th BRICS summit in Kazan, Modi met up with Xi Jinping, and they came to an agreement that both countries need to work together for peace. So what has happened is that the entire terms have been changed of engagement with China. How this has been done is that until now, starting from April 2020 is when the PLA came and occupied Indian territory in East Ladakh, and that is when India also did its build up. So since then, the whole idea was that without a border peace and stability, there can be no normal relations with China. This is what the thing was said by the Indian side. And border peace meant that disengagement finish. After that, Jaishankar publicly said a couple of times at various forums that yes, disengagement got over in October 2024. Now we are looking at de-escalation, and we are also looking at status quo ante of what it existed in April 2020, which of course will not happen, but this is a different story altogether. The PLA is not going back from its present locations. This is a given. Now that has been abandoned. At the Asia Society, Jaishankar did not mention that. He has instead mentioned what is now troubling India, which is that whatever security competition we have, as I said, in South Asia and Indian Ocean region, he said that we want that two things should be agreed to or should be followed by China, which is that our differences should not become disputes and competition should not become conflict. Think of it, these are the diplomacy mantras of the Chinese themselves. Why would Chinese be unhappy with this? So in other words, that centrality of border is now being replaced by the China argument all along that overall relations should improve and border should be just one of the issues and not the central issue in our bilateral relations going forward. That has been accepted. And I just explained the reason it has been accepted. Now, how far will this go? That is the point. The answer to that also was provided at Asia Society by Jaishankar, where he mentioned that India did not sign the RCEP, which is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, because the worry was that the unfair practices from a country which is to our east, implying China, they would flood our market with their products. In other words, India is fully aware about the manufacturing capability, the prowess of the Chinese. It is fully aware about the hollowed out manufacturing capability of India, what little was there. So it only wants to get into a bilateral trade agreement. There was no question of getting into a RCEP where China would be there. And so this is the reason India pulled out. He made it very clear. So at best, what we should be looking at is simple. We should be looking at certain steps which will just keep things in a sort of a calm state between the two countries. So at best, I would be very happy if the Indian side agrees to direct flights, which will help in the people-to-people contacts and relation. It will help our businesses. So direct flights, more visas should be really a welcome step to begin with. That should happen. And I think as 1st of April happens to be the 75th year of diplomatic relations between the two countries, so this should be possible. Now, as I said, I was talking of multipolar Asia and multipolar world and these two big powers, deciding the future of Asia. See, please understand where the world is going. There is no question of a multipolar Asia or a multipolar Africa or a multipolar Latin America. If you see the global vision, the global governance model of the Russians and the Chinese, which is where the global south has gone, it is about the world. It is not talking in terms of a multipolar Asia or a multipolar so-and-so region. So the point is that this thinking which existed is a thinking of the past. That is the time when the global governance model, the new global governance model, had not been introduced to the global south. Today, the future of the world or the stability in the world will be decided not by India and China, it will be decided by the global south countries, which are 80% of the world population. Thank you.